Every night, a little girl would stand quietly outside his restaurant, waiting for the day to end. She never asked for money, she never begged for food, but the restaurant owner noticed her. And almost every night, he gave her the leftovers he could no longer sell. Then one day, she disappeared. Years later, when his own life was falling apart, a woman walked into his nearly empty restaurant and changed everything. Mario had owned the small restaurant for so many years that he no longer remembered what life was like before it. It stood on the ground floor of an old two-story building at the corner of a busy street. Upstairs was a small living space where he, his wife Elena, and their son Paolo lived. Downstairs was the restaurant, the heart of their lives, the place that paid their bills, fed their family, and carried their hopes. It wasn't a fancy place. The sign outside had faded with time. The paint on the walls needed retouching. The tables were old but clean, and the menu was simple: fried rice, noodle dishes, soups, grilled meat, and a few home-style meals that regular customers loved. But for many years, the restaurant did well enough. Not enough to make them rich, but enough. Enough to keep the rent paid. Enough to keep food on the table. Enough to let Mario believe that hard work would always be enough to carry a family through difficult times. Every morning before sunrise, Mario was already awake. He would go downstairs while the city still yawned itself awake. He unlocked the front door, lifted the metal shutters, swept the floor, checked the rice, lit the stove, and began the routine he knew better than his own reflection. Elena handled the cashier when customers came in and helped in the kitchen when it got busy. Paolo, when he was old enough, wiped tables after school and carried supplies from the storeroom. Their life was not easy, but it was honest, and Mario had always believed there was dignity in that. Then one evening, many years ago, he noticed a little girl standing near the entrance. At first, he thought she was waiting for someone. She looked no older than 10 or 11. She wore a faded dress and slippers that seemed slightly too big for her feet. Her hair was tied back loosely, and though her face was clean, there was a tiredness in her eyes that children her age should never have had. She didn't come inside. She only stood there quietly, glancing at the food, then lowering her eyes whenever anyone looked her way. Mario noticed her while wiping down the counter near closing time. "Do you know that child?" he asked Elena softly. Elena glanced outside and shook her head. "No. Has she been there long?" "I don't know. Maybe a few minutes." Mario looked at the clock. It was almost closing. A few trays in the kitchen still held food they hadn't sold that day. Not enough to serve properly the next morning. Some would be thrown away. He looked back at the girl. There was something about the way she stood, still, quiet, trying not to be noticed, that tugged at him. He walked outside. The girl took a small step back, as if afraid she had done something wrong. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated before answering. "Lena." "Are you waiting for someone, Lena?" She lowered her eyes. "No, sir." "Have you eaten?" She didn't answer. Mario didn't ask again. He went back inside, packed some leftover food into a takeout container, then returned and handed it to her. Her eyes widened with surprise. "This would go to waste anyway," he said almost casually, as if he didn't want her to feel ashamed. "Take it." She stared at the container for a second, then took it carefully with both hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Mario nodded once and went back inside. He didn't think much of it at first, but the next evening, she came back. Again, she stood quietly near the entrance, not speaking, not asking, only waiting. And again, near closing, Mario packed what food he could no longer sell and gave it to her. After that, it became a quiet pattern. Almost every evening, Lena would appear. Sometimes she came early and waited across the street until the last few customers left. Sometimes Mario only noticed her when he began cleaning up. but she was there more often than not. Thin, quiet, patient, carrying a small container or plastic bag, always careful, always polite. And every evening, Mario gave her something: rice, a little meat, vegetables, soup, bread, whatever remained from the day. Sometimes Elena added fruit. Sometimes Paolo, still young then, slipped an extra boiled egg into the bag when his father wasn't looking. They never made her feel like a burden. They never asked for anything in return. Over time, Mario learned little things about her, not from direct questions, but from passing remarks. She lived nearby. Her mother was sick. She had a younger brother at home. Sometimes when Mario handed her the food, she would bow her head and say, "My mother will be happy," or "My brother likes this one." That was enough for him to understand. There were nights he watched her hurry away, clutching the food to her chest, and he felt something heavy settle in his heart. Not pity, something deeper, the sorrow of knowing how many people in the world were surviving by inches. Still, he told himself, at least this small thing mattered. At least for one family, tonight would be a little easier. Weeks passed, then months, and then one day, Lena stopped coming. At first, Mario thought she might be sick. Then he thought maybe she had gone to visit relatives. Then a week passed, then another. He found himself glancing at the door near closing time, expecting to see her small figure standing there again. But she never came. No goodbye, no explanation. She was simply gone. Life moved on, as it always did. Customers came and went. Supplies had to be bought. Rent had to be paid. Bills kept arriving with cruel punctuality. Eventually, Mario stopped looking toward the door. Years went by. The city changed. New businesses opened nearby. Bigger restaurants came in with brighter lights, modern interiors, and menus full of trendy dishes that younger people rushed to photograph and share online. Delivery apps changed how people ate. Rents rose, expenses climbed. Mario's restaurant, once dependable, slowly began to struggle. At first, the change was subtle. A few fewer customers on weekdays, then half-empty afternoons, then quiet evenings that used to be busy. "Maybe it's just a slow month," Elena would say. Mario nodded, though he wasn't sure he believed it. He tried promotions, he printed flyers, he extended hours, he added new items to the menu. He offered discounts to regulars. He partnered with delivery services, though the fees ate into what little profit remained. Still, the decline continued. Then came the hardest years of all. Prices of ingredients rose. Utility bills climbed. Repairs were needed. And on top of everything, they had fallen behind on rent. The building owner had been patient at first, then less patient. Then formal letters started arriving: past due, final notice, settle balance immediately. Mario read every letter with a tightening chest and a deepening sense of failure. It wasn't just the business at risk, it was their home. Upstairs, Elena began speaking more quietly, as if lowering her voice could keep fear from becoming real. Paolo, now a young man, tried to act strong, but Mario could see the worry on his face too. At night, after Elena and Paolo had gone to sleep, Mario often remained downstairs in the dark restaurant, sitting alone at one of the tables. The silence felt different now. Years earlier, it had been the silence of a long day's work. Now it felt like surrender inching closer. He would look around at the chipped tables, the counter he had wiped thousands of times, the kitchen where he had burned his hands and sweated through endless mornings, and wonder how something he had given his whole life to could still slip through his fingers. There were nights he blamed the economy, nights he blamed bad luck, and nights, hardest of all, when he blamed himself. Maybe he had not adapted fast enough. Maybe he had not been smart enough. Maybe hard work had limits after all. One rainy afternoon, the restaurant was nearly empty. Only 2 tables had been used since lunch, and both customers had left long ago. The sound of light rain tapped against the windows while Mario stood at the counter, pretending to organize receipts he had already arranged twice. Elena was upstairs resting. Paolo had gone out to look for part-time work. The front door opened. Mario looked up and saw a woman step inside. She appeared to be in her mid-30s. Her clothes were elegant but understated. Nothing flashy, yet everything about her carried quiet confidence. She paused just inside the doorway and looked slowly around the restaurant. Not the quick glance of a first-time customer deciding whether to stay. No, this was different. She looked at the walls, the tables, the counter, the menu board, as if every detail meant something. Then she smiled faintly and sat at a corner table. Mario approached with a menu, though she barely looked at it before ordering a simple meal. While waiting, she kept looking around the room. Not with judgment, with memory. Mario noticed but said nothing. He brought her food himself. She thanked him politely. Then she ate slowly, thoughtfully, as though the meal mattered more than the cost printed on the menu. When she finished, she did not immediately stand up. Instead, she folded her hands and waited until Mario looked her way. "Sir," she called softly. Mario walked over. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a moment. The look was not rude, not cold, but it carried a strange weight, as though she had traveled a long way toward this exact moment. "How long have you had this restaurant?" she asked. Mario gave a weary smile. "Most of my life, it feels like." She nodded. "It's changed a little," she said, glancing around, "but it still feels the same." Something in the way she said it made Mario pause. "Have you been here before?" he asked. The woman looked down briefly, then back up. "A long time ago." Mario searched his memory, but nothing came. She was too young to be one of the old regulars he remembered, and yet there was familiarity in her expression. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm not sure I remember." "That's all right," she replied. There was a brief silence. Then she asked, "How was business?" The question landed heavily. Mario hesitated, then gave the kind of small laugh people used when the truth had become too difficult to dress up. "Not very good," he admitted. "To be honest, we may not last much longer." The woman's face changed, just slightly but enough for him to notice. "You're closing?" "Maybe soon." He looked away for a moment. "I'm behind on rent. If things don't improve, we'll have to leave, both the restaurant and the apartment upstairs." The woman grew very still. For a second, Mario wondered if he had said too much. Customers didn't come for burdens. They came for meals. But she did not seem uncomfortable. Instead, she asked quietly, "You still live upstairs?" "Yes." "With your family?" "Yes." She nodded almost to herself. Then she reached into her bag and placed an envelope on the table. Mario frowned. "What's that?" "Please sit down," she said. He remained standing. "Ma'am, if this is charity—" "It isn't," she said gently. "Please." Something in her tone made him pull out the chair and sit. She slid the envelope toward him. Inside were documents, property documents. Mario stared at them, confused, turning pages with clumsy hands. He saw the address of the building. This building. His building. Or rather, the building he had rented for years. He looked up sharply. "I don't understand." The woman's voice was calm when she spoke. "The property has been fully paid." Mario blinked. "What?" "It belongs to you now." For a moment he thought maybe he had heard wrong, or perhaps stress had finally blurred the world beyond reason. "What do you mean it belongs to me?" "I bought it," she said softly, "and transferred it under your name." Mario stared at her. Rain tapped the windows. Somewhere in the kitchen, a refrigerator hummed. Everything else seemed to fall away. "That's not possible," he said at last. "It is." "But why?" His voice cracked slightly. "Why would you do this for me?" Her eyes glistened faintly, though her smile remained steady. "Because many years ago," she said, "you fed a hungry little girl almost every night." Mario stopped breathing for a second. The restaurant around him faded. The rain, the papers, the table, all of it disappeared beneath the sudden rush of an old memory. A child standing near the door, a faded dress, tired eyes, small hands reaching for a container of food. The woman continued quietly. You never asked me to explain. You never made me beg. You never embarrassed me. You simply gave me what you could not sell and sent me home with dignity. Mario's lips parted, but no words came. My mother was sick, she said. She could barely work. My little brother was always hungry. Some nights what you gave me was all we had. Mario felt his throat tighten. The food you handed me at the end of the day. She looked down for a moment, then back at him. To you, it may have been leftovers. To us, it was survival. His eyes widened. Lena, he whispered. She smiled through tears now. Yes. Mario leaned back slowly, as if the truth itself had weight. You! He shook his head in disbelief. You stopped coming. My mother got a little better. A relative helped us move. Later I worked, studied, worked more. Life changed. She took a slow breath. But I never forgot this place, and I never forgot you. Mario's vision blurred. He looked at the documents again, then at her, then back at the documents. This is too much, he said, voice unsteady. I only gave you leftovers. Lena shook her head. No, she said softly. You gave us more than food. Mario looked at her. You gave us time, she continued. Time for my mother to recover. Time for me to stay in school. Time for us not to fall apart completely. Her voice trembled now. And you gave me something else too. What? A reason to believe that there were still good people in the world. Mario lowered his head. He covered his eyes with one hand, overcome by a grief so strange and powerful, it felt almost like joy. Years of exhaustion, fear, shame, and silent struggle seemed to break all at once. I didn't know, he whispered. I had no idea. I know. You were just a child. And you were just a man trying to run a small restaurant, Lena replied. But you still noticed me. That was the moment he broke down. Not the money, not the building. That one sentence. You still noticed me. How many times had he believed small acts meant little? And yet, without knowing it, he had changed someone's life. Lena stayed a while longer, sharing in simple words how she had worked hard, built a life, and never forgot the kindness she received in that small restaurant. I didn't want you to lose this place, she said. Mario looked around. The worn tables, the faded walls, the counter shaped by years of hard work. For the first time in a long time, he didn't see failure. He saw a life that had mattered. As Lena prepared to leave, Mario called out softly, Lena. She turned. Thank you, he said, his voice heavy with emotion. She smiled. No. Thank you for feeding us when you had no reason to. She walked away. Mario stood quietly at the doorway, watching as the rain began to fade. And in that moment, he finally understood. The smallest acts of kindness are never truly small. They travel farther than we can see, and one day they find their way back to us. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more heartfelt stories about kindness, second chances, and life lessons, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. See you in the next story.